4 hours, 10 minutes, and 42 seconds without a lost time accident. So.
We will inform OSHA. It's like Senator Grew.
Privilege of the floor.
Granted.
Thank you. I apologize for making a commotion during Chief Clerk's roll call this morning. And I want to just thank Dick and everybody in the back for helping out, and all of you, for it was very, very nice, all the help you gave. I did have a small break, fracture and a bone in my arm, and I'm going to have surgery here in a little bit, and we'll get it all fixed up, but no problem, we're back on. So sorry to miss the morning, and I apologize for the commotion, but thank you.
Thank you.
You missed it.
Well, there's tough and there's Wyoming tough. You could be a hockey player. Stitch him up and get him back on the ice. Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, just to my colleague from Teton County, no apology necessary. But I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, if maybe from one of the parliamentarians, is if we start to see strange votes come out of my colleague over there due to the medication he's under for pain, if there's some procedural methodology that we can handle those certain circumstances, should they manifest themselves here on the floor?
Well, I'm sure he's no different than the rest of us. Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to mention that the good senator did make the right choice from the doctor. I suggested that our good vet in the front might have helped him out, and he said, hell no, I'd have just euthanized him.
Give him the old horse treatment. Okay, back to Senator Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. President. Back to business. Having voting on the prevailing side of Senate File 41, federal acts, legal actions authorized, I move for immediate reconsideration of the third reading vote on Senate File 41.
Thank you. That motion is non-debatable. Takes a majority of members present. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Vote for reconsideration. Anderson? No. Barlow? No. Boner? Aye. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? No. Crago? No. Crum? No. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott conflict? On the reconsideration? Nethercott? No. Olson? No. Pappas? No. Pearson? Pearson? Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? No. Scott? No. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz excused. Pearson?
Excused.
Excused. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. On the reconsideration, 16 aye, 13 no, 2 excused.
So the motion to reconsider has passed. We will now vote third reading. Yes, Mr. Senator Cooper?
I believe that's too many votes. 16 and 15 and 2.
16, 13, 2.
I'm sorry.
16, 13, 2. So the next vote will be the third reading vote on Senate File 41. This will take a majority of the members elected. So, Senate File 41, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass the Senate? The chief clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 41, Anderson? No. Barlow? No. Boner? Aye. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? No. Crago? No. Crum? No. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Conflict. Olson? No. Pappas? No. Pearson excused. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? No. Scott? No. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz excused. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 41, 16 aye, 13 no, 1 excused, 1 conflict.
Having received the vote of the majority members elected to the Senate, Senate File 41 has passed the Senate. Messages? Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
There are 2 excused and 1 conflict.
And 13 noes.
And 13 noes. And 15 ayes.
Thought it was 16 ayes.
16 was announced.
16 ayes, 13 noes, 1 excused, 1
There
conflict.
are 2 excused.
Mr. President, Senator Steinmetz is listed as an aye on the roll call. And she's not here today.
Thank you very much.
Good catch. Senator Case?
Wow, it's amazing that we have a real live roll call now out on the web. So we can just correct that right now?
Yes, I will create a new roll call.
Mr. President, we could re-announce
Well, we should
We'll
probably
redo
do a redo on the roll call, and then I'll re-announce
Fair
the
enough.
bill so we get it done properly. It
I've
might
never
take a
seen
little
this happen.
time, but we'll do it right. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Anderson?
Senate will stand at ease to the sound of the gavel. Senate will come back to order. Okay, members of the body, that was exciting. The motion for immediate reconsideration was carried. We only needed a majority of members present for that. We proceeded to the third reading vote upon reconsideration, which requires a majority of the members elected to pass, which is 16. The roll call vote was appropriately taken, and the vote was 15 ayes, 13 noes, 2 excused, and 1 conflict. By having failed to receive a majority of the members elected voting, Senate File 41 failed upon reconsideration. A technical error in the recording of the vote has been corrected by the chief clerk. An excused member was erroneously counted as an aye vote when the vote count was originally announced. So with that, I'll make it official and say that Senate File, when was it, 41, having failed to receive the majority votes of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 41 has failed the Senate. Messages from the House.
Mr. President, the following messages from the House are dated January 28, 2025. Message number 143. House Bill number 39, Property Tax Refund Program Revisions passed the House, ayes 61, excused 1. Mr. President, the following bills passed the House on third reading in an amended form. Message number 144, House Bill number 92, Wyoming Livestock Board Memorandums of Understanding, ayes 59, noes 2, excused 1. Message number 145, House Bill number 259, Supplemental K-12 School Facilities Appropriations 2, passed the House in an amended form, ayes 59, noes 1, excused 2. Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Thank you. Reports from standing committees.
Mr. President, the following reports are dated January 28, 2025. Committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom was referred Senate File 127, Administrative Rules, Legislative Review and Objection, respectfully reports back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Crago, French, Ide, McEwen, and Pearson. Senator French, Chairman. For Committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 152, Wildlife Management Task Force and State Forester, respectfully reports back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Boner, Hicks, Jones, Landon, and Schuler. Senator Landon, Chairman. Your Committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 148, Fire Suppression and Restoration Funding, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Boner, Hicks, Jones, Landon, and Schuler. Senator Landon, Chairman.
Thanks, Randy. Re-referral of bills, Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. Senate File 148, Fire Suppression and Restoration Funding. I would ask that it be re-referred to Committee 2, Appropriations. It does have an appropriation in it.
Absent objection, Senate File 148 has been re-referred to Committee number 2, Appropriations. Do you have another one for me, sir?
Well, Mr. President, funny you should ask. There it is. Senate File 152, Wildfire Management Task Force and State Forester, also has an appropriation, Mr. President. I would ask that it be re-referred to Committee 2, Appropriations.
Okay. Absent objection, Senate File 152 has been re-referred to Committee number 2, Appropriations. Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate File 127, Administrative Rules, Legislative Review and Objection, has an appropriation. I ask that be re-referred to Committee number 2, Appropriations, at this time.
Okay. Absent objection, Senate File 127 has been re-referred to Committee number 2, Appropriations. All right, Madam Floor Leader, that clears the desk. You better get up before they change their minds.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate resolve itself into Committee of the Whole.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Senator Kolb, please approach the desk.
Let me get the mic here. That's it. I finally got the right button. Would the committee of the whole please come to order? The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 30. With a reading clerk, please read in Senate File 30.
Senate File 30, Wyoming's Investment in Veterans' Mental Health, an act relating to education, sponsored by the Transportation Committee, was referred to Committee Number 8, which turned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Anderson, Brennan, Cooper, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Pappas, Chairman. Was re-referred to Committee Number 2, which turned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Driscoll, Baru, Larson, Salazar, and Smith. Senator Salazar, Chairman.
Sorry, I didn't see you over there, Senator Pappas. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, that it do so with a due pass recommendation on Senate File 30, Wyoming's Investment in Veterans' Mental Health. There is, could I have the first standing committee amendment read in, please?
Senate File 30, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 5, delete.
Thank you. And for explanation of this bill, I would turn it over to Senator Anderson.
Senator Anderson.
Chairman, Senate File 30 is about Wyoming's investment in veterans' mental health. And I think you just saw some action that we sure need some mental health with veterans. This bill is trying to help veterans help veterans. And so the veterans can get a loan that helps them to get a master's degree in social work or counseling or a doctorate degree in psychology at the University of Wyoming. And then they would help the veteran population by spending about 25% of their working hours providing mental health services within this state to the veterans. That loan can be used for tuition, mandatory fees, room and board, books and supplies, travel and personal expenses to attend the University of Wyoming. We moved it from the University of Wyoming's budget to the general file, and I have an amendment that changes all of that. I think that's the rest of the bill because we eliminated the rest of that bill. So the amendment, I would move amendment number 1 to Senate File 30, and I'll explain the amendment. On the first page, on line 5, we're pulling out amending a prior appropriation because we're taking it away from the University of Wyoming. On page 6, line 6, we're deleting school foundation program and inserting general fund because the money, if there's anything coming back and the repayment of the loans, it would go back to the general fund. So then we eliminate page 7 through page 15, which was the part for the University of Wyoming to pay for that. And then we change the last paragraph to section 2 instead of section 4. So that's what it does, is try to get some veterans to help veterans by being social workers and psychologists, and we put up $250,000 to get it started, and that's the bill. I would ask that we vote on Senate File, Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 30, please.
Any questions? Questions? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senator Pappas's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 30, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
That was my motion, actually.
The motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 30 has passed the Committee of the Whole. Back on the bill. Further questions? Oh. Senator Pappas.
Yes, there's a second standing committee amendment from the Appropriations Committee. I'd like it read in now.
Senate File 30, Standing Committee Amendment Number 2, page 1, line 6, B4.
And for explanation of this amendment, I would ask you to call on Senator Guru.
Senator Pappas, would you move the amendment?
I did move it.
You don't have to? Okay.
We can move it.
All right. Senator DeGru, none the worse for wear, sir.
Thank you. Well, we'll see about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 30 and ask for your favorable consideration. Good members, Mr. Chairman, good members of 68th. When the Appropriations Committee got this, as it was alluded to earlier in the bill, what basically was set up originally, the $250,000 appropriation, was to come from the university into the program out of their block grant. The money was to be repaid to the school foundation account. This caused a bit of discussion with the university, and that's why when it came to the Appropriations Committee, it came without an appropriation, and we were asked to kind of unravel it. Your Appropriations Committee felt that the $250,000 was appropriate, but there was concern about, as we're all talking this year about budgets and concern about ongoing budgets and things that just get rolled in and biennialized and go on and we never see them again. There was a concern amongst the committee about that. So we approved the $250,000 appropriation to come from the general fund and to go back from the general fund. But with one caveat, that we had a sunset after 3 years, so we could revisit the program to see how it was doing. Further, we asked the good folks from our military department to stop in next year when we're going through the budget to just say, how is this program evolving? As you all know, by rule, we can, as the Appropriations Committee, appropriate. We cannot legislate. With the words, adding the words, Mr. Chairman, sunset clause, we started legislating. So that is what we did. If there is any objection to this, we would be glad, those of us that were in favor of this, and I think that was just about everybody, that we'd be glad to bring an amendment to add the word sunset clause. If there is no objection, we could leave it the way it is. And I asked those that are much more cogent on rules to help with that, but that was what I was told by staff. So as it stands right now, your Appropriations Committee recommended a $250,000 appropriation for 3 years from the general fund and to be paid back to the general fund for this program with a sunset clause. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Pappas?
I thank you for the good senator from Appropriations. However, if you look on page 6, line 16 and 17, the program already had an expiration date of 2035. All the Appropriations Committee did is reduce that to 2038. So it's a shorter period. 2028, excuse me. Sorry. It was 2035, and now it's 2038. So really, the Appropriation Committee did not add legislation here. They just changed the date, made it a shorter appropriation. So I think we're good there. The idea for the 3 years is because we wanted to see that if the program would how it would pan out. And a doctorate degree will take 3 years to get through that program. So, and also, he mentioned he wanted that to look at the program, but we do also, it requires a report. If you look on line 8, we will get an annual report to see how the program is going. So there's reporting requirements here as well. Thank you.
Senator Anderson?
Mr. Chairman, I do want to object. That 3-year sunset makes it 2028, and we had set up 2035. 2035. The idea was that we would get some students through this. They would go through a master's program, they would go through a doctorate program. That could take up to 6 years for them to do that. Then they come back and start working in Wyoming. 3 years is not near enough, so I would object to that sunset at 3 years.
Senator Grew? Oh, excuse me. Wrong button. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for that objection, it's relatively simple and straightforward. I share the objection. I do think that we need to focus just on appropriation and that the timeline is policy related. Dividing the amendment, I asked that it be divided such that Division 1 is lines 7 and 8. That is only the change in the sunset date. And I do think that's out of order. We could take that as a separate vote. And then the rest of the balance of the bill is the second division.
Divisible.
Okay, thank you. So on the first point of changing the sunset date, two thoughts. One, I do think it's beyond the purview of the Appropriations Committee. I think that's probably up to members to decide what is and isn't, but theoretically for the second re-referral, if the Appropriations Committee is not the primary committee looking at the bill, then their purview is over the appropriation itself, not over the policy-related considerations. So even if we agree with this policy, even if everybody wants to cut the sunset back, it should probably come on a second reading amendment just sponsored by an individual for that debate. That's the appropriate approach, in my opinion, and we can have that debate. If that's not compelling, though, I do think it's really important to realize that I don't know an awful lot of people that have gotten a 3-year PhD. That's miracle time in PhDville. I sure wish I had hit 3 years, but I certainly didn't. Yeah, study, try harder. But I don't think you'll get a sense of whether the program is successful with one batch. You can't then fund a second cohort, right? You get one cohort that you could potentially fund because you're not going to sign up for a PhD program or any continuing education program with the promise that the legislature will come back and continue to revisit the sunset date on your PhD program a little later. That's not a compelling sales pitch to somebody that's looking for a university experience. So if we do shorten the timeline, there'll be basically no applications to this program. And I think this is a valuable program that has a lot of potential upside. So we can talk about that sunset, but I think we should have a further conversation on second reading about the sunset date so that it does what it's intending to do and instead of really just short circuit the program. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against Division 1.
Further questions? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Salazar's Standing Committee Amendment number 2, Division 1, please say aye. All those opposed?
No.
Senator Salazar's Second Committee Amendment number 2, Division 1 has failed the Committee of the Whole. We're back on Division 2. Questions? Division 2. Senator Hicks.
So a little discussion, and I just want to bring it to your attention. The language that you have down in the section 2 is very important. Because what this effectively does, it's not $250,000 appropriation. It's $250,000 appropriation in this bill now. But then you read that language and it says, is the intent of the legislature that this appropriation be included in the standard budget of the University of Wyoming for immediately succeeding fiscal biennium. So that $250,000 biennializes. So in the next budget, when we start next year, there'll be a $500,000 appropriation in there because it's a biennial budget. And then the way that's structured with the action that we just took, and you extend this out to 2035, that stays in the standard budget from the university all that time. So you'll never see that again. And so because it's $250,000 now in this budget, in this bill, and because we include this in the next budget, by the time you get through this, it's a $2.5 million appropriation that goes into the University of Wyoming's budget. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the first concern I have with the language in the standing committee amendment. I'll get to the $250,000 earlier. When I do the math on the original bill, I'm still perplexed as to how we come up with that number based on the fiscal note. But specifically to this amendment, I would ask you to oppose this amendment because it really turns into about a $2.5 million appropriation with that language that you'll never see again.
Senator Landon.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So another way to look at that, fellow senators, we've had this conversation a couple of times in this body during this session. What are we going to do with mental health issues? And particularly, what are we going to do with our veterans? Are we going to try to invest in programs and ways of helping them with mental health? Mental health and substance abuse. On the Judiciary Committee, I relayed to you that's what we repeatedly ran into on just about every policy consideration that we had the last 2 years. It all came back to mental health and substance abuse issues. We know that we have a facility problem. We know that there are countless other issues related to that, including the problems that our veterans are having. So this is a remedy that I think would work, but you have to invest in it. So how much do you invest in it? Well, would $100,000 do? No, it won't. It's going to take a little bit of an investment for us to try to help that population. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, on and against Division 2, that again throws it back into the University of Wyoming. We wanted it taken out of the general fund just for the reasons that the senator from Baggs is talking about. We didn't mean for it to be in the standard budget for the University of Wyoming, on and against the division.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my math is a little bit different. We've got really two, or the way I count it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 biennium. So I don't think it's $2.5 million. It would be $1.5 million. I think that also, remember, this money cannot be used for any other purpose. And if it is not used and the loans are not given, the money reverts back to the general fund. So the universities can't use it for any other purpose other than this loan program. If there's no loans given, the money comes back to the general fund.
Further questions? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So my apologies if I misunderstood, what the bringer of the bill in the first place, what the understanding was. I need a little bit better explanation of why there is an argument on the floor to strip this appropriation. because I thought the idea was to support this veterans counseling program. So I need a little bit of help from the senator. Thank you.
Senator Hicks.
Before I take my second time, we're on committee of the whole. So, Mr. Chairman, just a couple things. Not trying to strip the appropriation from the bill. I'm just trying to bring it to the attention that the way the language is worded in here, and to my colleague from Cheyenne, if you go into here and you go down to line 21, it says this appropriation be included and doubled in the standard budget. So that takes that 250,000 and makes it 500,000. 5 biennium, 5 times 500,000 is $2.5 million. I'm not objecting to the intent here. I'm just saying, is this what we really wanted to do with this program? And so we can bring this back. It can all be fixed in a second reading amendment to address this issue. But it is, make no bones about it, it is a $2.5 million increase to the block grant to the University of Wyoming that you won't see again.
Senator Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the legal world, we sometimes ask the judge, for the sake of completeness, to read the entire piece of the amendment or language that we're talking about. And if you look on line 22 and 23, specifically says it will not be included in the subsequent budget. And so I think it's a $750,000 proposal, but not positive about that. We might hear from the good committee that brought the amendment.
Senator Office.
Thank you, and the good previous speaker is correct. It's a $750,000 appropriation, and that gets to the fact that they changed the sunset date effectively and then provided sufficient funds up through the sunset date, which gets to the previous concerns. But I would say at this point that we're better off adopting this amendment, but we would need to go back in and change that language moving forward so that it can actually account for additional. And Mr. Chairman, with this language in place, my expectation would be that the university would fully fund a scholarship for each individual out of this money over the time length of the required term. So if you had an expectation of a 5-year term for a PhD, the university would set aside $130,000-ish for that individual to fully fund it. Otherwise, it would be irresponsible and you'd have to cut them off. That is an option if we allow this language. So on and for this division, because it does provide a funding mechanism. To the good senator from Natrona County's concerns about just taking it out of the general fund, this does take it out of the general fund, and I think this is appropriate that it needs to go from the general fund to the university as an appropriation. In the absence of this appropriation explicit, the bill is left leaving an open question of how that money gets to the university, right? We typically are appropriating from the general fund as opposed to just mentioning that the general fund will be a source of it. They don't have a blank check on it. So I do think this is an appropriate revision, this second division, to move the bill forward and to provide some funding. But I think we need to have that larger conversation on second reading with an amendment if one way or the other to either fully fund this or to figure out what an appropriate sunset date is going to be, because even with this amendment, it's still a little bit insufficient. So on and for the amendment, but it probably needs some tweaks.
Senator Pappas.
I too agree with the good senator from Albany County. I think we ought to, I urge you to approve this. If we need to tweak some of the language at the end of that paragraph, I'm certainly willing to entertain that on second reading amendment. But I think everybody thinks this program, believes this program is very helpful. When we can get a veteran providing the services to a veteran, I think it'll pay many dividends. So I urge you to pass it. If we need to keep working on it, willing to do that. Thank you.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be voting yes. We can fix this on
Second reading.
Call for the question? Are we? All those in favor of Senator Salazar's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment Number 2, Division 2, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those against?
No.
Motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment Number 2, Division 2, to Senate File 30 has passed. The Committee of the Whole, back on the bill. Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question on where the Veterans Administration comes into play here. They provide education benefits and also housing. So just want to get an idea where the VA comes into play, because I think the Wyoming VA is awesome. Thank you.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the good senator from Laramie County, the Veterans Administration has no role in this effort at all. This is an effort that we, as the legislature, are taking on, training veterans to serve our veterans. There's no federal involvement at all from the VA in this program at all. Thank you.
Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question wasn't so much if the VA was involved, it's just the VA provides these benefits. So why are we doing this? Maybe that's the question I should have asked. Thank you.
Further questions? Senator Pappas.
I guess to speak to that program, Mr. Chairman, the VA has no program that I'm aware of that will train veterans in social work and psychology and then require them to work in Wyoming, servicing our Wyoming veterans. This bill requires that. They have to, a quarter of their time has to be working with our veterans. If they don't agree to that, then their loans don't get repaid, and they actually have to foot the bills themselves. But the VA would not do that. If there are VA loans out there, and I'm sure there are, they would not have the stipulations that we're placing on the graduates of our program here.
Further discussion? Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, a couple of questions, and just because in my time here, I've never seen this where we take any funds and turn it over to an institution and then let them determine what the interest rate is on state funds. And so, you know, if you look at that, it says the university will determine what the interest rate on the loan terms are. And I was just wondering if there was any discussion. I've never seen that before, and not to say that it hasn't happened or it hasn't happened someplace else, but just discussion on that. And then if we get down, that's on page 5, line 9 on the interest rate. And then again, the university makes a determination on page 5, line 7 as to what would cause a hardship. And that would be for complete loan forgiveness. If we could get a little more discussion on that. And then what I'd also like to do is now that we're back on the bill, is talk a little bit about the fiscal note on the back. And so I'm just wondering where the $250,000 come from the program, because when I look down at the bottom of that, it talks about, based on the university's estimate, that approximately 13 students may have been eligible for this program. I believe that's over the last 5 years. And so that's 2.6 students per year if you take that 5-year average. And so when I take 2.6 and I divide it by $250,000, I come up with somewhere around $96,000 per student to participate in the program. And then when I get up to the university's estimates, the current cost of attendance for programs, it's $26,732 for residents and $40,000. So how did we come up with, if there's 13 eligible in the last 5 years, the average is 2.6 students. If we use the university's numbers for cost to attend, even if they were all non-residents, that would be $82,000 a year, $81,000 a year. So just a little discussion as to how we come up with the $250,000 based on the university's estimates of the number of individuals that would participate in the program.
Senator Pappas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the good senator from Baggs' question on his first question about the university having the powers and duties to implement the section, including the interest rates and all the things that you see in there. We didn't talk about it directly. However, the university said this is no different than the other loan repayment programs they have for nursing and for other programs that are out there. So I'm assuming this was structured based on current practices with other types of loan repayment programs. I certainly can try to get more information on that, but wasn't directly discussed, but we were told that it was based the same way they're doing with other loan repayment programs. Then on the other question, I lost my place here. Regarding the cost on the fiscal note, I believe, and again, I can clarify this with them and bring back some more clear language, but I understand the costs that you see there, the 26.7 and the 40.5, I believe that's the actual costs of the university cost, tuition and all that. This program will pay for additional books and room and board and many more. So I think that those numbers are only the cost of attending the university and not all the ancillary costs. But I can find that out for you as well.
Further questions? Call for the question. All those in favor of Senator Pappas's motion that when committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 30, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Senate File 30 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is division being called. All in favor of Senate File 30, please rise. You got it? Okay. Be seated. All those opposed, please rise. Be seated, thank you. Senate File 30 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 67. Will the reading clerk please read Senate File 67?
Senate File 67, Long-Term Homeowner Tax Exemption Revisions, an act relating to taxation, sponsored by the Revenue Committee. It was referred to Committee Number 3, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators French, Ide, and McEwen. No, Senators Case and Pappas. Senator McEwen, Chairman.
Senator McEwen.
I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 67 do pass. This is basically just a revision of Senate File 67 that we passed last time. It probably had a different number, but the bill's pretty much the same. There's 2 amendments to it. Real quick, what the bill does, it gives long-term homeowners property tax relief. The qualifications for it are age 65 and have been in the state for 25 years or paid property tax for 25 years. So I think we can get quickly through the amendments. The first amendment,
Would you like that to be read in, Senator McEwen?
please.
Please read it in.
Senate File 67, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 2, delete.
Okay, basically, what this amendment does is it changes the sunset date to 4 years. So it'll continue to go on. That'll give us at least 5 years' worth of data to analyze what's going on with it, but it doesn't put it into place in perpetuity. And with that, there is another amendment, and I will sit down for a moment.
Senator McEwen, would you like that to move that amendment? Oh, I thought he didn't move the first one, he just read it in. Senator McEwen?
Discussion on the amendment.
Move the, Senator McEwen, would you move the amendment?
Thought I did. I move, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 67.
I thought that was a standing committee amendment. It's a standing committee amendment.
I will now call on the good senator from Senate District 24 to explain the amendment. What I said before. Discussion, please.
Further discussion? No? Calling for the question? Question? Oh. Senator Ralphus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question. So moving it from 27 to 2030 takes it from an odd year to an even year. And there are implications to that, which means that to add a new sunset or extend the sunset, you would have to overcome a 2/3 vote for introduction of that bill. I was wondering if that was discussed by or considered. It might be more favorable, and this could be something to look at during a second reading amendment, change it back to an odd number for that reason. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? Senator Case?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would speak against the amendment. Extending a sunset of a program that we don't even know the impacts of is a bad idea. We have a bill on the table from last year that's just being implemented that has an existing sunset, of course, the 2027. We don't know what that's going to cost us. We don't know how that's going to be implemented. And so we're saying, well, we don't know how that's going to work, but let's double down and extend its period of being in operation. That's a bad idea. No to the amendment.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, I share those same concerns. You know, I think I hearken back to all the work that we did a year ago. Several of us in the room built a coalition, if you would, to try to come together, and we did everything we could to push property tax measures through the Senate, and it worked. And I'm really proud of that fact. The President helped lead that effort and did a great job. This was a bill that, you know, probably wasn't one of our priorities. And, but we did pass it, and it does give a tip of the hat to those that have been around a while and paid taxes for a long, long time in Wyoming. But I think that a sunset a little bit earlier, we can always extend it, we can always, cut an exemption in half or whatever, but I reluctantly, I'll stand on and against the amendment of the good chairman, simply because I think 27 is a better date. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? Seeing the question being called, the motion to adopt the Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 67. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Chair is in doubt. Please stand, everyone who in favor of the Standing Committee Amendment, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1. Be seated. All those opposed to Standing Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1. Be seated. The motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 69 has failed. We're back on the bill. I didn't see my sticky note here. 13 aye, 15 no. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 to Senate File 67. Would ask for your favorable consideration. If you remember a week ago when we were having this discussion about whether eight months is the appropriate time or 6 months is the appropriate time, the discussion that we posed at the time is why don't we just make this as a residency requirement? So, Mr. Chairman, that's all that does is.
Senator Hicks, could we read that in first?
I would have that, could I have that read in, please?
Senate File 67, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2, page 2, line 18, after.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 to Senate File 67 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ditto. This just adds a residency requirement if you're going to claim the long-term homeowners exemption. That stand for any questions.
Senator Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the same concern that I had, and again, I feel like we're deja vuing a little bit on this. But it doesn't necessarily have to be an exclusive residency requirement, to my understanding. Could you effectively claim residency in 2 states, or would we necessarily have an exclusive residency requirement to ensure that an individual is only claiming residency in 1 state? That's my first question. And second, if this individual spends 9 of their months in another state, but decides to claim residency for tax purposes in the state of Wyoming, is that consistent with the spirit of being a resident? It seems to me that the 8-month threshold that we had in the original legislation just unambiguously made sure that you could only have 1 of these exemptions and that you effectively had to be in Wyoming for the majority of your time. So I guess my question with this, and then even back to the bill, is what is our problem with the 8-month requirement that we're solving with this amendment? How is this making it clearer, better, or less rife for abuse?
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, and the way I read it, I guess, we get rid of the timeline, but then we say that you shall be a resident. For the purpose of this subparagraph, residency shall be determined by rule of the department. So it could be anything that they decide by rule and regulation. Obviously, it's got to go through the rulemaking process, but we probably don't have a say in here about that if we put it in rule. So I think I'm with the good senator from Albany County. I don't know, I think we are making this less clear by doing this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hicks?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just recall the discussion we have is so when you put a numeric month of occupancy here, it puts a duty on your county clerks and treasurers to go out and somehow verify this and say, yeah, they actually did stay there for 6 months or 8 months. It's absolutely impossible to do that. It's a criteria that you can establish that anybody can get around anytime they want. So what constitutes 8 months? And so with the issue of residency scenario, no matter what we do here, there's going to be somebody games the system. But if you have to have residency in the Wyoming typically, and when we looked at this, and one of the reasons we didn't specifically enumerate that, because there's a number of different statutory provisions for claiming residency. So I'd love to use the game and fish residency requirement that you have to be domiciled within the state of Wyoming for 9 months to a year. But there's a number of those out there. So if we're inclined to do that, I'm all for it. We can do that with the second reading amendment and come back and say this is what the legislative body defines what constitutes residency. Certainly, I think a driver's license in the state of Wyoming and maybe a bank account to show that you actually do transactions within the state and you have a driver's license. We can do that. I just left it the way it is, point of discussion. If we want to come back and define that in a second reading amendment, I'm all for that. But just keep in mind, under our statutory construct, we have a number of different definitions what constitutes residency. So I hope that answers those questions. Certainly would entertain a second amendment reading to specifically design what constitutes residency. So again, Mr. Chairman, on and for the amendment, ask for your favorable consideration.
Senator McEwen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's keep in mind the qualifications for this exemption. Over 65, excuse me, and 25 years of paying property tax. Even if you were going to try to cheat the residency issue on this, over 65 and been here for 25 years, this is almost impossible to cheat. And I'm going to say it one more time. Over 65, here for 25 years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ide?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm honored for this amendment. You know, the old language, I was actually advocating to just get rid of the 6 or 8 months and just keep people from having to question their own values on missing a day or two before the 6 or 8 months. And you know, I think that this residency is as close as we can get to honesty. You know, if, as the good senator from Baggs said, you know, if they have a Wyoming driver's license, they've qualified as a residence effectively. And I don't know if we want to perfect on that language or not, but I think it's a good amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Case?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to just take us back to the original bill we passed last year, which had 8 months as a requirement and a sunset date that was short-term. So this program kind of was a one and done, to give immediate relief. Now, it's being tried, the bill itself eliminated the sunset date. It takes the residency and goes from 8 months, Mr. Chairman, down to 6, and now we're going to get rid of the 6, and you can maybe potentially qualify twice, and you know, and so do we want to limit this thing or not? when we get done with these amendments, when we're discussing the bill, we need to talk about the constitutionality of what we passed last year and what this bill does. Because it's gonna fail that test, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? Oh. Senator McEwen.
I'm not gonna read the 10 court cases in front of the Supreme Court on exemptions and what was found constitutional and not constitutional. We talk about what we think is constitutional, and I gave you all 10 cases that proved this was constitutional. So I'd like to put that notion to bed. The second is, if you're 65 years old and have lived here for 25 years, and you have a motor home, and you get in the motor home and go visit your kids in Florida and then swing through Virginia to see your aunt and your uncle, does that count as residency outside the state? And on second reading, well, if we get rid of the requirement anyway, I don't see how you get to 2 exemptions. But we'll take a look at that for a second reading. But if we dictate 8 months, that means you can only get in your motor home for 4 months out of the year. Unless I'm misunderstanding this. Now, not only are we requiring them to be there for 8 months, we're dictating their lifestyle at retirement. So I'm on it for the amendment, and I'd like to move this to second reading, and we can work out some more of the details. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Hicks's motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 to Senate File 67, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Committee of the Whole Amendment to adopt Amendment number 2 to Senate File 67 is passed. Has passed. We are back on the bill. Further discussion on the bill? All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Way off in my periphery, Senator Barlow, excuse the oversight.
That's okay, Mr. Chairman. I think the gentleman that sat here before felt that way once in a while too. But no, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. So I think actually with the adoption of that last amendment, and take a look at Section 3. This program is being applied for right now to be effective in 2025. And so and now we have a Section 3 that says this begins the year of 2026. So now we're going to have to go back in this bill and actually have the current year be effective for this, because those folks have no notice of that change in residency requirement. And this, what we just changed, should be for 2026. At least that's the way I read it, because right now, we're just basically telling the folks, and in meeting with that department that's responsible for this, they are seeing a robust interest in this program right now, and those applications are due now through May, or they're taking applications now. So actually, what we're telling folks with this bill as it currently is we're changing the requirements and we're pushing it back a year. So I think we need to take that into accommodation, or have that discussion on second reading to make sure that we are not stranding those applicants this year, because the way I read this bill, the way I read this Section 3, that's what we've done. Not to mention, we've changed the requirements on the residency potentially. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Case?
Mr. Chairman, this bill is unconstitutional. It tries to take something we did last year and further compound its difficulties. Mr. Chairman, all taxation must be equal and uniform within each class. The Constitution prescribes the classes of property. 1 is gross production of minerals and mine products. 2 is property used for industrial purposes. and 3 is all other property, real and personal. We're dealing with class 3, all other property, real and personal. The Constitution says that taxation shall be equal and uniform within each class of property. This violates that. The bill last year violates it. We can't take and establish caps for people with certain criteria that over time the caps will break down the full and uniform value of the property. It will no longer be full value. It will no longer be uniform. I think I'll stop there.
Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in
Then I'll
favor?
keep continuing, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, well, continue, Senator Case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We can't, by exemption, do something indirectly that we cannot do directly. And there are many exemptions on the books, but they're different. This is to the heart of our class under Article 15, Section 11. And if you haven't read it yet, please read it, because it is the very heart of what we're trying to do here with caps that cause property to, over time, be valued differently. Direct violation. And so you cannot do by exemption an indirect runaround, which you can't do directly as prescribed by the Constitution.
Further questions? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, you know, we've had conversations about this, but I just dug back through and read the bill, and I don't know that it was really entirely clear that the bill has a complete repeal of the sunset from the original introduction. I think that's probably the biggest issue here. The other two are some policy choices within the bill, one being the removal of the spouse eligibility. You know, I'm still trying to harken back to the debate we had on this about a week ago, and I still can't remember why we're removing the spouse. So this is, I guess, the second nearly identical bill that removes the spouse eligibility that I don't know why we're doing it. Maybe a little more discussion about why the removal of that language. But getting to the removal of the sunset, you know, there has been some discussion today, and even if it is assumed that this is constitutional and we get to the point where everyone overcomes the concerns of the good senator from Lander, I guess I'd ask why we're so intent at this point in removing the sunset, which is the single biggest action this bill does, terminating that sunset when we haven't even seen what the price tag is yet. I think this bill last session, Mr. Chairman, was sold largely on the fact that it had a sunset. And we'll have to see what it does. We'll let it pass. We'll see how much it costs us, which is kind of an awkward moment, right? That's like we'll have to pass the bill to see what's in it. But we did that. Here we are. And now, still without seeing the implications of it, we're like, all right, we're good. Let's remove the sunset. This is a forever bill. And Mr. Chairman, I think you and the rest of us all know that when that repealer, when that sunset is gone, it'll take a Herculean effort to amend, change, repeal, or do anything else to this legislation, because once we get this in place, it will be a sacred cow. I think it's responsible for the legislature to continue to have the conversation, particularly in the context of the other property tax relief and other tax relief bills that we are likely to be passing this session. It needs to stay on the radar in a way that is addressable by the legislature, and if it needs to expire because it turns out to be bad public policy, it would be allowed to do so. So, Mr. Chairman, my concerns of this bill, that repeal is premature. Eliminating the sunset is bad policy and really truly goes against what this chamber was sold on last year. Mr. Chairman, I voted for this bill last year because I thought it was something that was directly targeting the people that likely needed it the most, our longtime residents of the state of Wyoming. But Mr. Chairman, I also voted for it knowing that we would continue to contemplate it, we would see the results, because that was how it was sold. And here we are, going back on that a short time later. You know, I wish I could go back perhaps and undo that vote, but I can't. I'd at least like to stick with what we were promised last session, which is the repealer that was put in place. Let's hold to the repealer, and let's revisit this when we actually have some data. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Landon.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And again, I want to thank the Revenue Committee for all the work they're doing. And this is a bill that was well described by the previous two speakers. The reason that I think we ought to reconsider this sunset date is not because it automatically goes away. What that sunset date does, and it's in statute all over the place, and the reason that the legislature does that is that it forces us to take another look at it. And we may, let's just use the year 27 for an example. That's a pretty good time for us to get a feel for all that we're up to in this session. We've been up to a lot, and we may need to look at each other and say, boy, can we really afford to continue this? Right now, it's a lot easier to tell our folks back home, look, this was an effort to get some relief to our population that's been around Wyoming for a long, long time because the property taxes went out of sight and we wanted to get you some relief right away. But bear in mind, it's not going to last forever. What that would do in 27, Mr. Chairman, you could come in here and say, you know, we can't do a 50%, but we may want to do 10, 20, 25%. That gives you that opportunity to do that. And I think if you eliminate the sunset altogether, I agree with the previous two speakers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really think this bill is premature. I mean, there's no reason to actually remove the sunset this year. We have another year. Let's, if we think that you want to remove it, why not just wait till the next session? That still gives us another year. But by next session, we'll have some numbers. I just think it's premature for us to even be discussing this. Let it work like it was designed to work last year. And I just believe that we're probably shooting ourselves in the foot by trying to remove it now, when we have a full 2 years to go. We can remove it next year. No need to do it now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I tell you, I'm going to be a no on this vote because I frankly don't like the narrowness of this exemption. You know, yes, it's for people over 65, and I certainly qualify. It's for people that have been around 25 years, been paying property tax, qualify in that score too, if I understand the mechanics of the bill properly. But I think that we need a more general tax reduction, property tax reduction. And I'm afraid if we pass too many of these little ones, we'll be unable to afford the general one. So for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote no on this bill, even though it's really aimed at people like me, I suppose.
Further discussion? Last chance, question being called. All those in favor of Senator McEwen's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 67, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The chair is unsure. Senator Hicks? All those in favor of Senate File 67, please rise. Be seated. All those opposed, please rise. So, 50. Okay, thank you. Be seated. Ellen, could I have the? Thank you. Pursuant to SR 6-5, having failed the standing division vote, a roll call vote is required. The chief clerk will call the roll. The vote was 13-15.
Committee of the Whole roll call vote, Senate File 67. Anderson? No. No. Barlow? No. Boner? No. No. Brennan? No. No. Case? No. No. Cooper? No. No. Crago? Aye. Crum? No. No. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Conflict? Hutchings? No. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Cole?
No.
No. Landon? Aye. Larson? Larson, aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? No. Pearson? No. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Conflict? Scott? No. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz excused. President Biteman? Aye. Closing vote? Jones? Jones, aye to no. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 67, 13 aye, 15 no, 1 excused, 2 conflict.
The next bill for our consideration is Senate. Oh. I shall find it. Hold on. Senate File 67, having failed a roll call vote pursuant to SR 6-S-A, is deemed indefinitely postponed. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 69. Would the reading clerk please read in Senate File 69?
Senate File 69, Homeowner Property Tax Exemption, an act relating to taxation, sponsored by the Revenue Committee. Was referred to Committee Number 3, which returned to Committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators French, Ide, and McEwen. No, Senators Case and Pappas. Senator McEwen, Chairman.
I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 69 do pass. So I went to the stable of property tax horses and I looked around and I saw this one. And last year it was our horse. Not sure where we're at this year. However, that horse has been fed and watered and taken care of very well. So I think this is our vehicle, or the horse we want to ride. And if we do this, it'll probably be, well, it will be the last real property tax bill you see. Having said that, basically right now, it sits with a 25% exemption. And there are a couple amendments. It goes up to a value of $2 million. So I think the first order of business I have is I would like to withdraw Standing Committee Amendment number 1.
Senator McEwen,
Oh, I gotta move
it hasn't been read in, so.
Could we move the bill, please?
Senate File 69, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 2, delete.
Do I need to read that in to withdraw? I did.
Senator McEwen, the amendment's been read in.
I would like to withdraw the Standing and Committee Amendment number 1.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that we cannot necessarily withdraw a standing committee amendment. It has to be voted on, and so the chairman can say, I ask you vote no, but I don't think we can just withdraw a standing committee amendment.
So it can't be withdrawn. Okay, Senator McEwen, would you then ask us to vote no on Standing Committee Amendment number 1?
And I sat up there as the chairman of the committee that all listened to a bunch of stuff, so I'm really kind of confused. At that point in time,
Senator McEwen, so this is a Standing Committee amendment, so it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the Standing Committee, so that's why if you are going to speak in opposition to it, then speak in opposition to it and then we'll vote.
I misunderstood this. Since my name's on it, I have the ability to withdraw it. Well, at this point in time, I would like everybody to vote no. I move Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 69 and ask everybody to vote no on this amendment.
Further discussion? Senator Landon.
Just a real quick point of order. Did we move the bill? Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious what the amendment does and why we would vote no. You know, on individual withdrawals, I'm usually pretty trusting when people want to pull their own amendments, but a little discussion on what the Standing Committee Amendment does, and then why we would vote no, since it is a Standing Committee Amendment, would be useful. Thank you.
Senator Ide.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I guess you withdrew. Senator McEwen.
The Standing Committee bill, or Standing Committee Amendment, addresses 2 different items, and it's next to impossible to divide. So there's Committee of the Whole amendments that have been rewritten to reflect what that does in 2 parts. That's why we want to withdraw or vote no on it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when I look at the Standing Committee Amendment, look at line 3 of the amendment, it talks about deleting a sunset date and deleting an appropriation. So it looks to me like those are the 2 actions that this amendment does. I haven't had time to read it all in, but certainly it looks like, at least to me, and I'd like this to be confirmed, that it is the amendment strikes the backfill, strikes whatever the money that would have backfilled this reduction in property tax. If that could be confirmed to me, and then what the repeal of the sunset date. If I'm reading this accurately, that would be appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ide?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the good senator from Campbell County, he's correct. Those two amendments, one was the backfill, the other one was the sunset date. And that's what we're asking to remove. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senator McEwen's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 69, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Chair is in doubt. Please stand if you're voting for Standing Committee Amendment number 1 for Senate File 69. Oh, very, very loud group. Senator McEwen.
Could we explain what an aye vote does and a no vote does?
Well, we just had a vote, Senator McEwen, so we need to complete this. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All those opposed, please stand. Well, it's more than 3. Thank you. Be seated.
If that's the case.
The motion to adopt a Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 69 has failed. We're back on the bill.
Point of interest.
I don't know. Senator McEwen.
Do these committee of the whole amendments have to go in order that they were put in, or can I change the order which we do it?
Senator McEwen, they have to go in the order they're listed as 1, 2, 3, 4 in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Office.
Yeah, to the extent, Mr. Chairman, that they're all his amendment, in the past, we have traditionally given flexibility to somebody to make the request to start with a certain amendment and go in a different order. If there were an order preference, there might be an objection to that, but in the past, we've usually given that opportunity. And I think with the complexity we have here, I would probably appreciate if the chairman would endeavor him to have that opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Office. Senator McEwen, you can go ahead and mix and match the order as you so wish.
We're having some fun now, aren't we? I move Standing Committee Amendment number 3 to Senate File 69.
What's that?
I will now explain the amendment.
Senator McEwen, we need to read that amendment in first.
Can we have that read in, please?
Senate File 69, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 3, page 2, line 10, delete.
I move Standing Committee Amendment number 3 to Senate File 69. I will now explain the amendment. Basically, what this does is it takes the $2 million threshold down to $1 million on value as the exemptions applied. I stand for questions.
Further questions? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator McEwen's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 3. Well, I was confused. Thank you. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 3 to Senate File 69, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment number 3 to Senate File 69 has passed. We're back on the bill. Senator McEwen, go ahead. Oh, well, I'll give it, sorry, it took it away.
I would like to read in Committee of the Whole Amendment number 4, please.
Senate File 69, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 4, page 2, line 7, delete.
Basically, what this amendment does is it takes the 25% exemption and moves it up to 50%
Senator
exemption.
McEwen, you have to move the amendment.
I would like to move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 4 to Senate File 69. Yeah, I got 5 chances at this. Eventually, I'm gonna get it right.
We're working with you, Senator McEwen, we're working with you.
Basically, what this amendment does is it takes the 25% exemption and moves it to 50%. And it'll bring it in line with Senate File 67. And that's really all the amendment does. I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is the cost differential on the fiscal note here? This is obviously substantial. So can we get a price tag on this? And it might even be in order for a roll call vote for this, probably would have for the last, but no, we're Committee of the Whole, my apologies. No need.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
No. Senator Case?
Mr. Chairman, I'd speak against this
Senator
amendment. Keeping it at 25% will limit the size of the exemption more than taking it to 50%. And it's the amount of the exemption under this paragraph, the new language would go from 25% to 50% of the fair market value of a single-family residential structure and associated improved lands. And with the last amendment, it would only apply to the first $1 million. But it's still a dramatic increase from 25% to 50%. And, Mr. Chairman, I might add, you can't do by exemption, creating a fair value. But we'll get to that later.
Senator Hicks and Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, with the action at last minute change in that exemption level, that's yet to be determined. I'm hoping to have those numbers when we move from 2 million to 1 million, but if you just double the exemption, if you go to your fiscal note, basically you can go back to page, what this does, bar not including the last amendment, would primarily double that. So total fiscal impact now looks like it's about $450 million if we adopted this amendment. Now that's spread out between both the general fund. It'd be a decrease of funding, but it has about $450 million if we adopted this amendment. That's a round number, not counting what we did by reducing that value from 2 to 1. So just double what's on the back page.
Senator McEwen.
Working with the Department of Revenue, according to the numbers, by dropping this down to a 1 million threshold and bumping it up to 50%, the difference is just about $33 million is it. It goes from 2.25 to 253. And I'll be glad to share those numbers with anybody that wants to see them. Once again, I ask for your aye vote.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, rising to speak in favor of the amendment. Mr. Chairman, you've heard the price tag in terms of our revenue. I think that this is a very important amendment to pass for 2 reasons. First, talking to my constituents in this last election, they were naturally the ones I asked, and I did ask systematically a number of them. They're all in favor of tax decrease, but talking to them, a good quarter to third, maybe larger, really need this kind of relief. Then they seem to be fitting Mr. Chairman, into two classes, number of younger people, families, whom the inflation that we've had in the past few years was really hurting and was blowing their budgets. And they're essentially living paycheck to paycheck and having trouble getting by. And the extra inflation that we were seeing in our property values was really hurting them. Second group was older, retired people who had retired on a budget that worked before inflation wrecked it and before the property tax inflation really wrecked it. And they really need this. And what I'm afraid is that if we don't do this, come the 2026 election, we'll see it imposed on us from the outside without the limitation on the large expensive homes. So it would reach the large expensive homes that are owned by people who don't need this kind of an exemption. So I think with this makes this a real alternative to that will satisfy the needs, satisfy it early, reach the people that really help it, and this is a good place to concentrate our property tax relief. So on and for the amendment.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Agree with my colleague from Natrona County. That ballot initiative is staring us in the face. I think if you're going to handicap that, you got to know that that thing's going to pass in 2026. So we have to, not that should make our decision here, but we better have our eye on that ball here. What's coming out of the House, if everybody's been paying attention to it. This is a really good bill. I think this would solve that ballot initiative issue. And this would clean up 67 that we talked about earlier as well. I'm honored for this bill. I think this is the horse that we need to ride. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? President Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just some numbers to remind the body what we're talking about here. 2019 is total assessed valuation for residential property in Wyoming. It's $5.86 billion. 2023, it jumped to $9.84 billion, a 68% increase. Our constituents want relief. This provides that relief. They're going to get it one way or the other. They're going to get it through us or they're going to do it themselves. I would support this amendment and this process because we are a republic, not a democracy, and I want to keep this republic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Vice President Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable members, I also in support of this amendment. It's my belief that not only this amendment, which is key to this bill, but this bill is the best that we have in this chamber for property tax relief. There are a number of alternatives coming from the other chamber. This is our best way to bring property tax relief for everyone from this chamber. This is it. So I ask you to think long and hard about supporting this. It is worth supporting. And I stand in favor of not only the amendment, but the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to point out that drop to the value disqualified quite a few homes in Wyoming. So it would have seemed like it was going to be 2 for 1. But it takes kind of an expensive bill and makes it just a wee bit more expensive while giving 50% relief. And it equates everything out to Senate File 67. So as we go forward, the other thing I want to point out is this brings property tax values back to 2019. So even though this isn't an acquisition value bill, this gives us the ability to solve some of the acquisition value questions in one clean bill. So I would urge that you vote for the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senator McEwen's motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 4 to Senate File 69, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 4 to Senate File 69 has passed. We're now back on the bill. Senator McEwen.
And I beg everybody's patience, because this is still yet another different method. But could I have Senate File number 2 read in? Committee of the Whole, Amendment number 2 read in.
Senate File 69, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 2, page 1, line 2, delete.
I would like to withdraw that amendment this time. Absent objection.
Absent objection, withdrawn.
Wow, that was slick. Standing Committee, I move Standing Committee Amendment number 1. Could we read in Standing Committee Amendment number 1? Committee of the Whole.
Senator Hicks, get addressed. Senator McEwen.
Could we read in Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1?
Senate File 69, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 3, delete.
You're now going to see why I went in the order that I did. This amendment basically deletes the appropriation.
Did you move the amendment?
Could we move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1? Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 basically deletes the appropriation, or what we like to call backfill. And with that, I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Further discussion? Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I support this amendment. Remember that what backfilling does is it takes taxes that are local, that are decided on by programs and votes of people, and mill levies imposed by county commissioners. This gives relief to paying those. If we backfill, then it divorces the connection of people to what happens when they vote for lower taxes, or they vote for representatives that want lower taxes. So if we backfill everything, no one gets the connection. There's the other problem, Mr. Chairman, and the people paying for the backfill are not the same people enjoying those local services. So they're not homeowners paying for the backfill. It's probably our mineral industry, Mr. Chairman. And so this indeed will hurt local tax revenues, but it's also the right thing to do. Because if we keep backfilling everything, why don't we just get rid of all local taxes if we're going to backfill it? So this is a good amendment. I support it.
Senator Landon and Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. That is one way to look at it. And I can't argue with the senator from Fremont County, but I can't in good conscience take home a vote that the county and the municipality did not make. It'd be one thing if we say, back home, we've decided that you should do this tax break and have them vote on it themselves. But we're the ones voting on a tax break. The counties aren't, the municipalities aren't. The senator makes a good point. We have to help people understand that tax cuts are directly related to snowplows, they are directly related to police services and fire services, all of that stuff back home. So for now, I'm gonna vote for this amendment because I'm not gonna do that to the counties and municipalities back home. Thank you.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, on or against amendment, and indirectly, I think it does exactly what my colleague from Fremont County said, that voters need to be accountable. But I was elected by those voters and have had conversations on this and understand the ramifications. It's not just snowplows. You know, when I look at this and we don't backfill, I would call this the defund the police and defund the fire department tax relief program, because that's what effectively you do if you don't backfill this. Not to mention, and I think everybody in this body has seen the long-term profile when it does to the school capital, school foundation program account. So the discussion that we're not having with the people back home is that 70% of this money goes to support your K through 12 education system. And if you want a tax relief and a property tax relief, then you better support education reform and reforming the block model, because it's 70% of all of these dollars go to fund that. And to divorce these arguments and say it's about property tax relief, no, it's about having a conversation with the taxpayers to say, we'll give you property tax relief, but don't come down here and ask for us to fund ECAs, continue to spend $500 million a biennium on new school construction, and continue to drive that education budget that's got built-in escalators out, and then ask for property tax relief. You can't do both. And so until we have that conversation, Mr. Chairman, the implications of voting for this and not backfilling it, and have an honest conversation of the ramifications of defunding police, your local sheriff's department, defunding the fire departments, not funding our school foundation program, and yet we come down here and we're going to say we're going to continue to fund education at the current rate. I think, from my perspective, that each individual has to make a determination on their own, is irresponsible. And so let's have the conversation, let's backfill this, because this is going to happen anyway. When you start draining this much money from the school foundation program, this day's coming, folks. I'm not going to be here, but 4 years from now, that school foundation program is broke. There is no money for that. And you drove that ship off the cliff. And so keep in mind, you can pay now or you can pay later. Backfill, let's have a conversation, an honest conversation with the taxpayers of the state of Wyoming.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, my apologies. This has been a little bit difficult to understand and follow. So this amendment strips out the money we're talking about, and I previously said that I would be supporting the amendment. My good friends have indicated that they don't think I spoke as though I wanted to support the amendment, so I'm not going to. I'm going to vote against it, okay? Good chairman even helped, which I appreciate. Again, a vote against this amendment leaves the backfill in the bill, I believe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Landon, for that explanation. Senator Jones, then Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. Chairman, I truly don't think that our constituents realize the ramifications of a property tax cut this much without backfill. We all represent counties at home, and can you all sit here and say that every single one of your counties can take this big of a hit without backfilling it? That's completely irresponsible of us to sit here and decide what kind of ramifications this will be at home. On and against this amendment.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the amendment, and for all the reasons we just heard. The idea that we can give dramatic tax cuts and then have no consequences is unrealistic. But we can do it for a little while because over the past couple of decades, our predecessors, as well as us, had the foresight to put together a rather incredible fiscal system, realistically, that had savings and reserve accounts that could sustain the state through hard times. Many of us in here served during those hard times, and we were thankful. We were thankful for those reserve accounts. They changed it from us having to cut $300 million in a single year, when we could have had to cut $600, $700 million in that year. We benefited from the foresight and wisdom of the folks that came before us. And honestly, we benefit from the wisdom and foresight of the folks in the 70s that set up the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund, right? Saving, thinking through the strategic approach. What this bill does overall, with or without the backfill, is say, all right, we recognize that we might have hard times again in the future. We recognize that when we look at the school foundation program account, we don't quite see how we're going to pay the bills in the future. But we're going to go ahead and cut a couple of $100 million a year from our revenue regardless. And that's the state side. Now we contemplate how it affects all of our communities. We do have the possibility of providing what we call a backfill, but that's only spending our savings to make up for the fact that we're intentionally shorting our revenue so that we can't make ends meet. And the irony there, Mr. Chairman, is the idea that we're supposed to have a balanced budget. We can only have a balanced budget because the folks that came before us set up $1.5 billion in one big account that'll probably turn into 1.8, and a series of budget reserve accounts that total another billion-ish of available funds. So we can go down this backfill path for a little while and we can make it look good. We can pretend that we're not hurting the people out in the state because they don't understand that we're actually paying for their services by spending at an incredible burn rate all of the savings that we've taken decades to build up. That's not fiscal conservatism. That's not. You would never do this at home. You would never do this with your own finances. You wouldn't think about it even for a minute. Well, we'll just run up the credit card bill. We'll pay by running up the credit card bill and we'll pretend that we're meeting our budget. So here, what we have is an opportunity through this amendment to make it clear to our communities around the state that we are shorting you because you asked us to. You voted to short the community's revenue by asking us to cut property taxes in a draconian manner. We all heard that message loud and clear. That's what the bill does. That's at least fair. That was what was asked for. But the idea that we need to burn the state's entire financial system down with it and burn through the good work of the people that came before us, building up revenue not from the residential properties, but typically from our oil and gas during the good years. We're going to spend all of those resources so that we can pretend that this isn't a draconian cut and that this is something that we can afford as a state. Mr. Chairman, this amendment, and the reason I want to vote aye on it, is because it at least provides the real picture. If we're going to be short on revenue, let's make sure that everybody feels the consequences of being short on revenue. Let's balance our budget. That's what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to be balancing it because the folks that came before us had the foresight to put some savings together. That's not balancing your budget. That's burning the work of others. On and for the amendment. Let's be realistic.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate all the good discussion. I think what we're forgetting here is that, sure, a lot of people want to ask for property tax relief, and that's what this bill will do. But I think you got to remember there's a whole lot of constituents in your communities that don't own a home. They rent, they live in apartments, they might live with somebody else. But we're gonna turn around and tell them, if we don't backfill this, sorry, we're not gonna plow your streets. We're not gonna make sure that there's a cop that shows up when you need one, or a fireman to show up whenever there's a fire. We wanna make sure we have clean drinking water, our sewers work, and we don't want 50 kids in a classroom. There's so many things, special districts. I think a lot of times people forget about all these special districts that rely on this as well. And so I want to be able to go back and say to my communities, yeah, for those of you who own homes, we did some good things for you. But there's a lot of you out there that don't own homes. I don't want to tell the little old ladies in my neighborhood, sorry, you're not going to get your roads plowed ever again, because that's the first thing our city has said. If our services are cut, that's the first thing to go, and they'll be stuck in their homes. And there's just so many other services that we just don't talk about. We talk about the schools a lot, but there's a lot of services that this will affect. So if you're okay with going back and telling your constituents, particularly those folks that don't own homes, hey, we took care of the ones that own homes, but sorry, rest of you are out in the, out in the dark. So please vote no on this.
Senator Crum.
Yeah, I just want to point out that my good colleague from the south side of the Gem City is right on. We can't spend our future. A couple things. You've got to remember, 30% of our income right now comes through these investments. So if we spend these investments, we're going to come back and give a 30% hike just to get back even once our investments are gone in a couple years. The other thing is it was pointed out, about 70% goes to schools. So if 70% goes to schools and they're going to get funded, then that means our cities and counties are going to take, I don't know the exact number, but let's say 80 to 85% cut in this property tax, because the school's going to get theirs. So it's going to come from somewhere. That's going to come from the cities and counties. And then lastly, all this is doing is robbing from Peter to pay Paul, and it's smoke and mirrors. So I'm going to vote against the amendment, because everybody needs to understand what we're doing here and clearly understand that this is affecting services. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I kind of apologize for getting a little passionate about this, but folks, we need to have an honest conversation about what the ramifications is. And so backfill may kick down the road, but let me prognosticate about the future political environment in Wyoming. And so we have an opportunity to backfill and have a serious conversation with the people of the state of Wyoming about what's the ramifications of this. Property tax relief in the context of funding local government services, police, fire, other emergency services, and also a conversation of what's the right size to spend on education. But I want to talk about just a little bit for my conservative friends and for the people around the state of Wyoming. If we don't backfill, let me tell you what the narrative's going to be is those conservatives are incapable of governing in the state of Wyoming, because they all went down to Cheyenne, they destroyed local governments, they defunded the schools, we got little property. The ramifications of that action on a conservative future of this body greatly hinges on our ability to come down here and govern. Direct government, whether we like it or not, is not conservatism. We need to reform it, we need to trim the fat, and we need to do what's right. But I would be very cautious if you want to continue to move a conservative legislature forward in this state, that we do it responsibly. And I don't feel like this is responsible by cutting off all of the funding and not backfilling this back to the school foundation program, which I've always been an advocate for reform, reduce the cost. But the cost of those local governments is going to be significant. The consequences of that is to jeopardize continued conservative legislatures in the state of Wyoming. I believe that, Mr. Chairman. So think clearly about how you guys vote on this.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote against this amendment because I think we do need the backfill to help preserve fundamental services at the local level. I think we can afford it, looking at the same projections of the future. It looks to me like the reserves are adequate, so for sure we can afford it for the immediate few years. I think we're probably going to be able to afford it long-term, because I think we're going to see growth in our oil and gas revenues, because we'll have ended the assault on the production of fossil fuels that we've been experiencing the past few years. I think our prospects economically are quite good. Now, it does mean, Mr. Chairman, we're going to have to control some of our appetite for spending in the future, and particularly in some of the education areas. And we'll have the recalibration to deal with going forward on the operating side of the schools. We'll have to do that in a way that enables us to keep our expenditures reasonable and under control. We are very well funded in the schools right now. We don't need a lot of growth, fortunately. And we'll have to do something to control school capital construction. I think we can do that. We'll have a proposal on that. So I think that we're in a position to afford the backfill for the immediate future. I think we've got a good chance of affording it long-term, Mr. Chairman. So I would urge the defeat of this amendment, leave the backfill in the bill, and protect the funding for the fundamental governmental services that are provided at the local level.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good discussion all the way around. It's good to hear everything. The good senator from Baggs there again. I get his argument. You know, we don't want to look like the conservatives can't govern down here, but the flip side of that is if we don't come out of here with some real reform, the citizens are going to do it do their job for us with this initiative, and the initiative doesn't have any backfill in it either. So how you want to handicap that, like I said again, nobody really knows, but I think for the most part, the people, all they focus on is getting their property taxes cut. And I think we need to think real hard about passing this amendment here without the backfill. So on and for this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pearson.
When is it my turn? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what you have to remember is you can say that you're going to punish the citizens and punish your communities for asking for a property tax relief and demanding property tax relief. But the thing you have to remember is that our citizens didn't ask for these property tax increases over the last 5 years either. They didn't ask for a 70% to 130% increase in their property taxes based on people coming in from out of state and buying land at high values and that affecting us. So we have to remember that. Yes, they're demanding. They're demanding that we do something. Do we make our counties suffer? I don't think so. That's all I have to say. Sorry, I get passionate about this stuff. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're discussing Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1. Senator Case, then Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm tightening up my conservative compass here, and I'm trying to understand how it is a conservative principle for folks in the central government to control everything and all the expenditures that go to our local governments. Wyoming, more than any other state, centralizes the distributions from Cheyenne out to the world. We do it in our schools, we do it with direct distribution, we do it with the 5 elected officials, when they go through the SLID process, everything goes through Cheyenne. And if we keep doing that, there's no connection between local government and efficiency. What do we really want to have in local government? What would we really want to have as a level of schools? What do we really want to have? What mill levies should we put in as a county commission? That's the most direct one. But I guess we're so conservative that we think, well, we know better than they do. So we're going to do it all down here in Cheyenne, and then we're just going to take the money here and ship it out. And don't worry, we'll always make up the difference. Big brother, that's kind of how the federal government works, doesn't it, Mr. Chairman? How is that conservative to take that function down here in Cheyenne? How is that conservative? Conservative is when people in local communities decide their own destiny. They have a realistic assessment of what things cost, what they're voting for. They encumber themselves with taxes, and they go forward. We just keep breaking that system. And yeah, I would have to say that probably people can't control their level of property taxes. But by golly, if we keep backfilling so that there's no connection between property taxes and local services whatsoever, and a county commission could just keep raising the mill levy to max, that's not a conservative system, you guys. That's not a responsible system, and I'm not going to use a not-so-conservative word. It's not a sustainable system, because it just destroys any buffer we have here in Cheyenne and puts hope on the backs of the mineral industry going forward, as we've done before successfully. And maybe we'll be able to do that for the next decade. Maybe not. This doesn't sound conservative to me. Voting for this amendment sounds conservative.
I'll yield. Senator McEwen, then Senator Scott.
Wow. I put these 4 amendments together because those were the 4 big questions. I did not put them together to start a cage match, although it's been entertaining. And I hear you wouldn't spend all your money at home and get a credit card out and pay for it. And the sky's falling, and we're not going to have police, and we're not going to have fire departments. Vote this amendment up or down on your conscience. But I want to leave you with one thought. We have an $11.1 billion budget in this state. Let me say that one more time. 11.1. This cut is 2.4%. 2.4%. So I don't think the snow plows are going to dry up, and the police are going to go away, and the fire departments are going to go away. This really is a policy decision, and that's why I put it out here for the body to decide. But as you think about this, it's a 2.4% cut. It's about $252 million divided by 11.1 billion. 11.1 billion. This is 2.8%. And if we are in a state down here that all our forefathers set us up for success, and we're hanging on by a fingernail on 2.8%, we're already in trouble anyway. So vote it up, vote it down, and I call for the question.
Thank you, Senator McEwen. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to wrap this up to my colleague in Fremont County. This is the ultimate of big government, because this is the one tax that we don't collect and redistribute. This stays at those counties. It's called property taxes. So now we, being the benevolent central government, we're going to confiscate that property tax stays at the local level. They determine how they want to send it. But now we're just going to take that away from them. And to my colleague on the Revenue Committee, Mr. Chairman, if you look at the context of the budget, and you pull your goldenrod out here, we're using general fund money, and we're using legislative stabilization. I want you to look at it, because this is the source of the money, so this is the fiscal impact. Out of that 11.1 billion, probably close to 60% of that is federal funds, other funds, private funds. Think of capital construction, where you got millions of dollars going into community college. That's all encompassing. You pull your goldenrod out here, and it shows you what we spent last year out of these accounts that we're talking about here. Last year, net revenues after we transferred out, so with the current program we have right now, it's 4.358 billion. It's not 11 billion. This money is going to come out of those two accounts, out of the general fund and the legislative stabilization reserve account. Our general fund budget for the state of Wyoming, just using state funds, out of those accounts, was $4.3 billion. 11.1 includes every source of funding that the state of Wyoming accumulates, which is a significant source of federal funds included in that. That's the number you need to use, not comparing that to all of those federal funds for the fiscal impact associated on the entire budget.
Senator Roppus, then President Biden.
And following up on my good friend from Carbon County, the 11.1 billion is also a biennial number. So you strip out the fact that 50-ish% of it ends up being federal and other funds, you're down to the 5 billion-ish that my good friend was discussing, and then you divide that effectively in two. And now you're at around 2.5 billion, and we're giving a $250 million tax cut. That's 10%. That's not 2.5%, that's 10%. That's a big deal.
President Biden.
Back on the amendment, Mr. Chairman, which is the backfill. We've been debating the bill for the last, 20 minutes or so. My good friend from Fremont's exactly right. The conservative position is not to backfill. It's clear as day to me. Now, that being said, let's talk numbers. 2019 numbers versus 2023 numbers. Remember, every single county has saw their assessed valuation go up. What does that mean? That means you take the assessment rate, which we control. The counties don't control the assessed rate. They don't set that rate. We do. Take that 9.5% times the assessed value, add your mill levies, and I would remind you, some mill levies are adjustable, some are not. So the counties really don't have a lot to do with giving you tax relief. So we do. But we're really good at kicking the can down the road as well and avoiding painful decisions that need to be made, and so nothing happens. Every county saw a substantial increase in assessed valuations, so you times that by the 9.5%, set your mill levies. Their budgets grew, Mr. Chairman. Their budgets grew. Now, before the 50% amendment came in, the old 25% that I came up with as chairman of revenue back in the day, I didn't just pull it out of my keister, Mr. Chairman. That number actually meant something. That made it so you didn't have to backfill anybody because it took everybody back to 2019. Fire trucks were running in 2019 in every single county, Mr. Chairman. Police were running in every single county in 2019, Mr. Chairman. Schools were funded. The sky didn't fall in 2019. So let's cut all the hyperbole and the dramatic, language that we've been using in here, and let's get to work. We're dangerously close to losing a bill that is probably our last best hope. And I would encourage the body to focus on the job at hand. The amendment is about whether or not to backfill. I've heard arguments for and against. Let's vote it up or down, but let's keep our eyes on the prize, sir. vote aye.
Further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor of Senator McEwen's motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 69, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
The chair is in doubt, and this is obviously very important, so all those in favor, please rise. Be seated. It was 18 ayes. Oh, do it anyway? Okay. Please rise for the no votes. Thank you. It was 18, 11, 11 no, 11, 18 aye. The motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 69 has passed. We're now back on the bill. We have more amendments? Okay. Whose is it?
Troy, is there any more amendments?
There's one more amendment. Could the reader please read the next amendment?
Senate File 69, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 5, page 1, line 9, after.
Senator McEwen.
Could I have Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 5 read in, please?
We did. Move the amendment.
At this point in time, I'd like to withdraw this amendment without objection to Senate File 69.
Motion to withdraw Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 5. Hearing no objection. We're back on the bill. Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember mentioning on the first day of the session that when we argue ideas, we do our best work. And I have to say, while this has been sometimes laborious, I really do think this is some of our best work. We're arguing ideas. It's been said that this bill is our best horse to ride. Will it be? I don't know. We've still got a couple, sounds like we got a little more tweaking to do and a little more talking amongst ourselves to go. But I will say, as someone who's been here for a few years, and screaming about property tax relief, I would like to say to you, welcome to the party. We've started a couple, 5, 6 years ago, I asked for $250,000 for what we lovingly call a little old lady program to give tax relief to the poorest of the poor, and I didn't even get it out of committee. Today, we're talking about giving real tax relief across the board, but we've been talking about it for a couple of years. Last year, we passed a 4% cap. Last year, we passed a 65-25. Last year, we doubled down and even got a letter from the first floor imploring us to fund that little old lady program. And now it's oversubscribed by $10 million, up to $24 million. So the poorest of the poor are means tested and getting the relief, along with counties that are putting in, including my own, to make it virtually a 100% tax relief for people who need it most in our senior population. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the work we've done with the cap. I'm proud of the work we've done with sunsetting bills so we can take a look and get to this date, to this bill. There's more work to be done, Mr. Chairman, I do agree. There's some things I've got some issues with, but this may be the horse to ride.
So I'm on and for this today, knowing there's still work to be done and arguments to go. Maybe there'll be a no at the end. But I thank you. This is when we do our best work. And I appreciate it very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I know that you want to get to a vote, and so do I. I just wanted to thank the body for the opportunity for what I thought was a great discussion and a really great debate. Thank you for the opportunity for some of us who've been around here for a while. For me, year number 19. And I hope you'll pardon those of us who have been around long enough to, we do get a little emotional. We get, we're pretty proud of the fact that all the work we did through the years to put us in a position where we can even talk about giving money back. I am proud of that, and I'm going to support this bill all the way to the end because I believe in the effort to try to give some relief out across there, and I'm really proud of the fact that we have the wherewithal to do it. It's all because you can't imagine how many years we went home and people said, what are you doing putting all that money away when you could be doing X or Y or Z? We didn't do it. We were disciplined, we were fiscally responsible, and so we're in the position we're in today. And you know what? It's for days like this that I worked really hard to put that money aside. If we want to spend a little bit of it to give this tax cut and we want to try to buffer it a little bit back home, I'm good with that. So on and for the bill, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity.
Question.
Senator Dockstetter.
Thank you. Council to keep our eye on the prize. I'll be on and for the bill. What brings us to this point? Over in my country, this is why I was stressed so much over the last couple of years as we tried to deal with this. 2020 to 21, the average property tax increased 10% on structures, 10% on land. 21-22, 35 to 55% increase on structures, 20 to 30% increase on land. 22 to 23, 30% increase on structures, 20 to 30% on land. 23-24, 10 to 15% increase on structures, 20 to 30% on land. We got to get this done. As we were counseled, to keep our eye on the prize, on and for the bill.
Question. Question being called. All those in favor of Senator McEwen's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report to do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 69, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 69 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration. Oh, excuse me, Majority Floor Leader Nethercott. You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. So moved. Chihuahua.
Fun fact. Will the reading clerk read the Committee of the Whole report?
Mr. President, your Committee of the Whole, having gathered the considerations bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 79, do pass amended. Senate File 75, do pass amended. Senate File 109, do pass amended. Senate File 115, do pass. Senate File 122, do pass. Senate File 30, do pass amended. Senate File 67 failed to pass Committee of the Whole and was indefinitely postponed. Senate File 69, do pass amended. Senator Kolb, Chairman.
Senator Kolb.
Mr. Chairman, I move the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
You have heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Committee of the Whole report has been adopted. Thank you, Chairman Kolb. Do we have any messages? We're good? Okay, Madam Majority Floor Leader, that clears the desk.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned until Wednesday, January 29th, 2025, until 10 a.m. I got that backwards, until 10 a.m., Wednesday, January 29th, 2025, 10 a.m.
Thank you. Any announcements, committee announcements? Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, the 29th, on noon recess in W110. And please attend to this because there's been a change in the bills. We will not be hearing Senate File 125. To those who are hearing out, this is a change. The sponsor was unable to be here tomorrow, concerned about maybe you're not maybe today, may not be here tomorrow, so she's asked it to be postponed until Monday, till next Monday. So we are not hearing Senate File 125 per the request of the sponsor. We will be hearing, Mr. President, Senate File 130, Emergency Assistance, Immunity, Mental Health Services, and Senate File 147, Service Dogs, Training, and Crimes. Again, Mr. President, this is a request of the sponsor of 125. It will be heard next Monday. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that grace. Chairman Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, your favorite committee, Senate Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, number 9, will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, January 29th, upon noon recess in the Capitol Extension Room W4. We will hear 2 bills, Senate File 135, Defense of State Banking 1, and Senate File 143, Public Monies Deposits in Credit Unions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to reiterate, the Education Committee will meet in the morning, 8 o'clock, the usual place, W110, to hear Senate File 126, Establishment of a K through 8 Public Lab School, Senate File 137, School Finance Cash Reserves, and Senate File 131, Charter School Leasing, if time permits.
Thank you. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. President, your ad hoc, anybody that wants to participate, discussion on Senate File 60 that looks at the sales tax distribution. We do have a draft to contemplate. We'll be meeting in 10 minutes upstairs in the conference room up there.
Thank you. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Transportation Committee will meet Thursday in the morning at 8 p.m. In the Capitol Extension and online to consider the following bills: Senate File 119, Expedited Professional Licensure for Military Members; Senate Joint Resolution 7, NCSL 50th Anniversary; and Senate File 141, United States Marine Corps Corporal Seth Rasmussen Memorial Highway.
Thank you, Chairman Pappas. Any other announcements? All right, you've all heard the motion of the Majority Floor Leader. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion has been adopted. The Senate will stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.